You've got a huge job at VW. Why did you agree to be a commissioner for this huge undertaking?
As the Planning Commission, I think it's good to have a voice of business. Many of the other commissioners some of them are from the academic field, some from the field of education, some from the medical field. So I think it was necessary also for the Commission to have somebody from big business in terms of some of the methodologies and the tactical approaches and the structured approach that we have, that some of that learning I can also apply into the process. The sort of fields of activity that we wanted to concentrate on, and we decided on 8 fields of activity, one of which was socio-economic development and job creation. And being the leading person in the field from the so-called business side, I think it was logical that I would chair or head up that working group. The working group is obviously quite broad in the sense that socio-economic development and job creation is a broad theme, and we decided, the commissioners decided early on that we would split that into 3 sort of sub-themes, one being industrial development, another one being, or let's call it more urban industrial development, another one being rural development, and the third one being tourism. We saw those as the three subfields within socio-economic development and job creation. I think the word socioeconomic is important and relevant because it's not just about creating economic development for the sake of economic development. It's economic development for the sake of improving the social condition of people that live in the province. So the province is a province of 2 very distinctly different types of economies. In the big metro areas, Port Elizabeth, the Nelson Mandela Metro and the Buffalo City Metro as the 2 big metros, and the western part of the province relatively industrialized, which is going to require some different approaches to maybe what's going to be required in the eastern part of the province, which is the old homelands. That's one of the enablers that we're going to have to work on, because if we want investment in the rural sector to happen in the eastern part of the province, we're going to have clarity of that land ownership issue. Private investment will not go in if there is that uncertainty, and without private investment, there probably won't be enough catalytic activity to start a renewal process in that field of agriculture. And remember, agriculture is not just agriculture in its pure sense. We're also talking about trying to grow agro-processing, to beneficiation of it. We don't want to just export the crops. Public sector investments, that'll also have a catalytic effect. Well, if you look at the province, one of the things that we're busy discovering in the research we're doing is, first of all, we don't get our fair share of national budget. So there's actually 2 problems. One is the fact that there is insufficient funding generally to facilitate economic development. But the reason what we first have to fix is this institutional capacity to effectively deploy the funds before the national government is going to give us more funds. The funding that we get from government, I guess what we have to try and do is invest in projects, the public money has to be invested in projects which will then have a catalytic effect and start attracting the private investment. The province in many areas is such a deficit in terms of infrastructure and the core enablers for development that first of all there has to be some investment by the so-called state. And the big public sector projects, the big public investment projects will hopefully become catalysts for the private sector to then follow. The development of the N2 road,
the Wild Coast,
the special economic zone in the Wild Coast. So even outside of the big metros, I think we're going to have a few catalytic public projects or public sector funded projects. The other area that there's simple things that we can do in the province to try and have some catalytic effects. We are totally under-exploiting the extended public works programs. There's a lot of money available from national government for extended public works programs. There's a big job still to be done if you just take the metros, the 2 metros, a big job still to be done in the townships in terms of upgrading some of the basics, the infrastructural basics in the townships. So some of those projects can also start having catalytic effects, because there's a project which is funded by the state, extended public work project, creates some employment, and that project then starts becoming a catalyst to attract private sector interest and activity and investment. And often the failure of the institutional capacity in the province and in the metros has led to us not getting the funding, and if we do get the funding, applying it into these projects. I think the notion that we just need to have 3 or 4 mega projects in the province, and in the next 20 years the world will be different, I think that's a bit naive. Of course, a project in Tombo in the metro, the local metro, would definitely have a major catalytic effect. If you take a project, I think that project has about an 80 or 90 billion rand investment aspect to it. That is a massive investment relative to all the other investments that happen in the province and the metro. So that would clearly, I think the construction time is 6 to 8 years, that would clearly, in the Nelson Mandela Metro, have a major catalytic effect. If we had the Mzimvubu water project going ahead, the N2 road, the Wild Coast, the development of the Wild Coast economic zone, those would also have significant catalytic effects, but they on their own are not going to be enough. The province is too big, it's too diverse, the poverty levels, the unemployment levels are too high for just 2 or 3 mega projects to do it on their own. Yeah, I think the key thing about the work of the Planning Commission is the provincial development plan is really a plan which is a plan that has to be there to improve the human condition of all people that live in the province, not just for people that live in the urban areas, and also not just for people that live in the rural areas. So it has to be a plan that over a long period of time affects positively the human condition of all citizens of the province. There's certain parts of the province that are more suited to different types of development. Economic development doesn't equal industrialization, and industrialization doesn't equal economic development. There's many other catalysts for economic development. Tourism can be a major catalyst. We have tremendous natural resources in the province which have been unexploited. We have 800 kilometers of coastline. So we have a beautiful coastline, quite diverse. If you take the Wild Coast in the eastern part and the differences between that and the southwestern part of the province. So tourism has to be a very important catalyst. We've done relatively well, but the question is, how do you take it to the next level? And once again, it has to go to the next level by unlocking and probably privatizing and commercializing many of the natural resources we have here, the parks, to try and exploit those natural resources that we have in the best interest of growing economic activity. We have to market what we have a lot better. I don't think we've necessarily marketed the province. The province it doesn't only have natural resources which are interesting for tourists. We have a deep culture and history in the province. This province has really, this is one of the fascinating things for me as a commissioner over the last months, is to really get an insight into the history, the depth of history and culture that this province actually has. And there are many ways that can be made interesting from a tourist point of view. So we have to diversify the the industrial part of the industry. Focus points, once again, agro-processing, the so-called green industry. We have to have a good look at the maritime industry and the economy that should develop itself around a province with 3 ports. Tourism. Education is a problem in the province, which is also ironical because we actually have a number of very good universities in the province, and what our studies are also showing is that whilst primary and secondary education is not doing so well, at the tertiary level we have very good institutions. And what we've discovering is that many of the leading business people and political leaders and social leaders in our country have actually progressed through these tertiary institutions, but because they don't find adequate opportunities, they leave the province. So we're actually exporting a lot of our talent. Yeah, if you look at connectivity, we have lower levels of connectivity than the other provinces. I mean, clearly it's because of the fact that we are two provinces within the province, the so-called western industrialized bit and the eastern bit with huge unemployment, huge poverty. That plays a role. So there is a job that has to be done in terms of creating better ICT infrastructure. And that, of course, is also an enabler for business generally. If we don't have a well-competitive, high-quality ICT infrastructure, we're not going to attract business, and even business does come here, they won't be competitive because it's become an absolute business enabler. In terms of the industrialization theme, what we have to concentrate on is employment, is labor-intensive and employment-intensive industrialization. So many of these catalytic projects would, whether it is a mega project like a project in Tomba or building a dam, building a major road network, or whether it's infrastructural projects in upgrading townships, these projects will tend to be labor intensive, which is good, that's what we need. We need to look how we can create other further industrialization, labor intensive industrialization, whether it's in the light manufacturing or whether it's trying to resurrect some elements of textile and that value chain, as well as the agro-processing value chain. We need to create, so all these things, whether it's the state-funded infrastructural projects, upgrading townships or building dams, whether it's a project in Tomba building a refinery, which is an 8-year project, together with all these other smaller projects, we have to create this catalytic effect where we pull more and more people, unemployed people, into employment. And of course, that has to be the start of it, or will be the start of it, to create meaningful employment, and that will tend to have a multiplier effect on further employment. What we're trying to do with the national development plan, and what we're also trying to do with the provincial development plan, is have a plan that extends beyond the life of one term of office, and have a plan which has a longer term objective. There's no instant pudding here. You can't go to the spa and buy a packet of ingredients and mix it, and tomorrow you have a solution to the provincial problems. This is a long-term plan. This plan has to endure beyond the term of current office bearers, beyond the term of a current political party. It's not the plan of the government. It's not the plan of a political party like the ANC. This is the plan of the people of the province. And the people, society, have to be the key thing that forces the pace on this plan.